There's a law in the United Kingdom that makes it illegal to die inside the Houses of Parliament. Not a rumor, not a myth, an actual enforceable piece of legislation, and it is still on the books today. From salmon handled in suspicious circumstances to chewing gum treated like contraband, these aren't ancient folklore. These are real laws that government simply never got around to removing, and the reasons behind them are stranger than the laws themselves. The Palace of Westminster is one of the most recognizable buildings on Earth, home to the British Parliament, centuries of history, and apparently a rule that says you cannot die there. The story behind it goes back to the 1800s. Under an old legal technicality, anyone who died on Crown property was entitled to a state funeral, a privilege reserved for royalty and heads of state. To avoid the absurd possibility of granting a full state funeral to every MP who died mid-debate, officials ruled that the building simply could not be a place of death. In practice, this meant that if someone collapsed inside Parliament and could not be revived, emergency services were instructed to officially record the death as occurring outside the building, sometimes in the ambulance, sometimes on arrival at hospital. The law has never been repealed. It remains quietly sitting in the legal record, waiting to be enforced the next time someone has the audacity to die in the wrong postcode. But if dying in the wrong building can get you into legal trouble, wait until you hear what happens when you're caught with a fish and no good explanation for it. And somehow, that still isn't the strangest law Britain kept alive. Under the Salmon Act of 1986, it is illegal in the United Kingdom to handle a salmon or any freshwater fish in what the law describes as suspicious circumstances. The legislation was originally designed to combat illegal poaching and the black market trade of wild salmon, which was rampant in parts of Scotland and northern England at the time. Rivers were being stripped illegally, and the fish were being sold off quietly with no paper trail. Parliament's solution? Make the act of possession itself the crime if something seemed off. No receipt, no explanation, suspicious behavior. That was enough for prosecution. The problem is that suspicious circumstances was never precisely defined in the text of the law, which means technically that a perfectly innocent person carrying a grocery bag full of salmon through a car park at 2 in the morning could theoretically be questioned under a 1986 Act of Parliament. The law remains active. Poaching is still a problem, and somewhere in Britain, a salmon is being handled suspiciously right now. Fish laws are strange, but what about the laws that follow you before you're even old enough to understand them? Starting with the name on your birth certificate. In many countries, the name you give your child is not entirely your decision. Governments have strict and sometimes baffling rules about what parents are allowed to call their babies. In Germany, a child's name must be gender identifiable, meaning you cannot give a boy a traditionally female name and vice versa without prior approval. Names that could cause embarrassment to the child are also prohibited, and the local civil registry office has the authority to reject any submission it deems inappropriate. Iceland goes further. The country maintains an official personal names register, a government-approved list of roughly 5,000 names. If the name you want isn't on it, you need to apply for special permission. Names are rejected regularly. One family fought a years-long legal battle simply to name their daughter Harriet. Other countries, too, ban names deemed offensive, foreign, or culturally inappropriate. The reasoning in each case is similar: protecting the child from ridicule, preserving cultural identity, or maintaining social order. Whether governments should have that power is a different conversation entirely, but the laws exist, They are enforced, and parents have been fined for ignoring them. Naming a child is personal, but in one city-state, even what you put in your mouth in public is a matter of national legislation. Singapore is famous for being immaculately clean. Streets are spotless. Public transport runs without interruption. And since 1992, the import and sale of chewing gum has been heavily restricted, making it, for most practical purposes, illegal. The law came directly from Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, who had grown increasingly frustrated with the cost of cleaning gum off pavements, seats, and, critically, the sensors on the country's newly opened MRT subway doors. Vandals were sticking gum on the door sensors, causing delays across the entire network. One incident too many, and the ban followed within months. Today, you can obtain therapeutic gum from a pharmacist with a valid prescription. Nicotine replacement gum, for example, is permitted. But walking into a shop and buying a packet of Wrigley's is not an option. The fine for importing gum illegally can reach up to 100,000 Singapore dollars. What started as a subway maintenance issue became one of the most debated examples of government control over personal habit in modern history. Singapore controls what you chew. Greece has decided to control what you wear, at least when you're visiting the ruins. In 2009, the Greek Culture Ministry made a ruling that drew international headlines. High-heeled shoes are banned at many of Greece's ancient archaeological sites, including the Acropolis in Athens. The reasoning is structural. Sites like the Acropolis are built on marble that is thousands of years old. The concentrated pressure of a stiletto heel, which can exceed the weight per square inch of an elephant's foot, causes microfractures in the stone. Over time, repeated impact from tourist footwear was causing measurable, accelerating damage to surfaces that had survived intact for over 2 millennia. The law applies broadly. Any shoe with a small pointed heel falls under the restriction. Visitors are advised to wear flat, rubber-soled footwear. Guards at the sites are authorized to turn away those who arrive in non-compliant shoes. It sounds absurd on the surface, but the alternative, watching the Parthenon slowly crumble under the weight of fashion choices, is considerably worse. Greece protects its stones from shoes. Venice has gone to war with something far older and far more stubborn: the pigeon. For centuries, feeding the pigeons of St. Mark's Square was one of the defining tourist rituals of Venice. Vendors sold bags of seed. Postcards featured tourists buried in birds. It was, by all accounts, a beloved experience. In 2008, Venice banned it entirely. The fine for feeding pigeons in the city centre now stands at up to €700. The problem was never the birds themselves. It was the scale of the damage. At peak population, Venice was home to over 130,000 pigeons. Their droppings are highly acidic and were actively eroding the city's centuries-old marble facades, stone bridges, and canal walls. The cost of cleaning and repairing the damage ran into millions of euros annually. Vendors who had built livelihoods on selling bird feed in the square resisted loudly. Several were prosecuted. The ban was ultimately upheld. Today, the pigeons are still there, just considerably fewer of them, and considerably hungrier. Laws are supposed to reflect the society that writes them, but societies move faster than legislation. A rule written to solve a problem in 1880, or 1965, or 1992 doesn't automatically disappear when that problem changes shape or disappears entirely. Which raises a question worth sitting with. If governments can't keep up with their own laws, how many rules are quietly shaping your life right now that nobody alive remembers writing? If laws this bizarre are still active, Imagine how many rules still shape your life without you even knowing they exist. If you found that interesting, subscribe, and we'll keep digging in facts like this.